Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the coaching carousel. Obviously, Billy Napier out of Florida. I think the world of that Florida job. I'll be totally honest with you. I think if it's leveraged correctly, I think you can win multiple national championships pretty quickly, and I think you can become a Hall of Fame coach. Urban Meyer did it. So that's how I know. But at the end of the day, it is going to be really interesting. A lot more jobs that could be opening, a couple that could totally turn this entire sport on its head. I think there's a couple, particularly in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that could get really interesting. I think the Michigan one's relatively safe right now, but we'll get into that as it unfolds. Right now, we got some games to talk about, and there's some huge ones in the SEC this upcoming weekend, as there are pretty much every week going forward. The SEC, as you can imagine, is going to have a lot of games that have a lot to do with what the CFP is going to be going forward. We'll talk about the rankings debacle and the SEC versus Big Ten thing on Thursday. I got a lot to say about that one. But let's go ahead and jump into Ole Miss at Oklahoma. This is a huge one. Ole Miss coming off the loss of their first loss of the season to Georgia in a very weird circumstance where their defense didn't get a stop. And they go to a Norman team that has a really good defense. They are not going to be able to run the way that they did on Georgia against Oklahoma. I can almost promise you that. They score 5 touchdowns on their first 5 drives. That's probably not going to happen on Saturday in Norman. The Ole Miss offense really rolled against Georgia. Now they move forward, and I think Oklahoma on the other side, Georgia moved the ball pretty efficiently. Can John Mateer find the opening that he needs to? Can they run the ball efficiently? They did a really good job of it last week against South Carolina. South Carolina struggled to stop the run, but so is Ole Miss in some respect. In some respects. But at the end of the day, I think you absolutely have the ability to build off this and possibly John Mateer finds some openings. Possibly this Ole Miss defense just feels a little bit off their game coming in from last week, and you have an Ole Miss defense that just a little bit off. You have an Oklahoma offense that continues to get more healthy. John Mateer continues to get more comfortable. Could get really interesting with that Oklahoma offense against that Ole Miss defense. The other side of the ball is where the show is. Let's just be totally honest. Lane Kiffin against Brent Venables is as good as it gets. I believe it is the best offensive mind in football against the best defensive mind in college football. Plain and simple. I believe those guys are absolutely elite at what they do, and I think it's going to be an absolute chess match, and we will see who wins. It's going to be a battle back and forth between these two guys, and Lane Kiffin will find openings. I promise you that. Brent Venables will trick that guy a couple of times. I can promise you that. That's just the way it works. There's been a little bit of sparring of words. I don't know how much of that was meant to be throwing direct shots at Brent Venables, but Lane does a good job of towing that line just a little bit and makes for good fun leading up to these games. But the Oklahoma offense did look better last week. The South Carolina defense isn't the best test, but I don't know if Ole Miss is either. So that's the big time question here. How many stops can Oklahoma get against the Ole Miss offense that's just firing on all cylinders? How many times can the Oklahoma offense find a way to get points? Because the Oklahoma offense, in a lot of ways, has gotten in their own way. They haven't been able to run the football effectively. The offensive line hasn't held up enough. And then obviously the John Mateer injury plays into all of that. But I do think there's a part of this where you have a, let's call it a subpar offense, at least as of right this second, for Oklahoma against a subpar defense. You have a world-class offense against a world-class defense. Who wins the battle? I'll get to it in a second. I tend to believe there's a little bit of an edge one way or the other. But one way or another, it is a huge game for these two football teams. If Oklahoma loses this game, there's a ton of games going forward that you can still lose. And frankly, you will lose at least one of them. I can almost promise you that, and that will knock you out of the CFP. So you badly need this one. For Ole Miss, if you lose, it's a doable schedule. You can get through it without making mistakes, but then you just got one more chance. And it's happened last year. I don't think you want to get to the point where you only have one more chance, because I think you might fall on your face at some point. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a really fun matchup. I think when you look at the keys to the game, there's a lot to look at here. I think John Mateer's legs are going to be massive. I think Trinidad Chambliss has got to play on time against this Oklahoma defense, just an absolute nightmare. And whose run game can find a way to get going? Both run games are iffy at the very best. Kewan Lacey has been a good player for Ole Miss. You've gotten a little bit more from the young player, I'm blanking on his name right this second, and I apologize. Very talented freshman running back for Oklahoma that can make a lot of different plays for them. I think this is going to be a really fun game. I think they go back and forth. at the end of the day, I'm going to take the special defense. I'm going to take Oklahoma to get a huge one at home here. I think this is a team that can get enough stops against this Ole Miss defense to at least get them off the field. And I don't really trust this Ole Miss defense to stop much of John Mateer. Now, I think they can do enough. I think they can make a couple of plays. But at the end of the day, I don't know if they're going to be able to really stop the run the way that Oklahoma's going to, the way you need to stop the run against Oklahoma to slow down John Mateer. I think Oklahoma gets the win here. I think the defense plays really, really incredibly. I think the home atmosphere has a ton to do with it. And I think Ole Miss drops 2 in a row and is on the ropes going into the rest of the season. And Oklahoma's in a okay spot with till a ton of really, really tough games coming forward. But I'll take Oklahoma to win this one. I think it's a really fun back and forth. But I think John Mateer and that Oklahoma offense finds enough openings. I think that defense for Oklahoma is just too good. Missouri at number 10, Vanderbilt, another big game in Nashville. I guess it's just the new norm in college football, but this one's going to be very, very fun. And frankly, I think you could call this a college football playing game, if I'm being totally honest. I think one of these teams has the ability to get to the CFP if they were to win this one. I think Missouri needs to win it outright. I think you have A&M on deck. You have a lot of big-time games down the road. If you lose this one, I'm very, very worried about where you go going forward if you find a way to get to maybe even 9-3 after this one. But at the end of the day, I think they need this one very badly. I think for Vanderbilt, if they find a way to win this one, they are firmly in the mix. They still have Texas, they still have Tennessee coming up, but they're a team that absolutely can get this win, and then maybe you just clip a Texas, maybe you just clip a Tennessee, and then that's enough to get you into the CFP. But I got to be honest, I'd love to see a Tennessee versus Vanderbilt game for a spot in the CFP at the end of the year. Wishful thinking at this very moment. But one of the big-time advantages I tend to believe Missouri is going to have. Now, the Vanderbilt offensive line has been downright incredible. I don't know how many people are stopping Zion Young and Damon Wilson this year. They're absolute nightmares on the edge, and it's going to be a huge thing for this offense. The question becomes, these are supreme athletes on the outside. They're supreme pass rushers. Do they overcommit? Do they go too far upfield? Because we've seen what happens when these edge rushers get a little bit too far upfield, a lane opens, and Diego Pavia runs for 22 yards and a touchdown. There is the ability for that to happen. So can Missouri, can they not be overly aggressive? And then Vanderbilt, can you use some of the over-aggression that you probably will see from time to time? I mean, these are guys that want to go make a football play, but at the end of the day, can you use that aggression kind of just against them, where you're not necessarily negating how good Zion Young is and how good Damon Wilson are? You're just pushing them upfield, so they're a little bit more out of the play, and Diego Pavia can run and make a play away from them. That's probably as good as you're going to do, if I'm being totally honest. The edge rushers on the other side absolutely can slow this thing down. If they play level rushing, if they make sure they set edges, if they do all of the little stuff that you don't necessarily see on highlight reels but stops this Vanderbilt offense, I think they have the ability to shut that down. I think Vanderbilt could use it against them in some respects. But for Vanderbilt, they're really suffocating on defense. Now, they're not necessarily flashy. They're not necessarily going to make huge plays and turn over the ball a ton, make a ton of sacks. But they find a way to just slow down everything. They slow down a run game. They make sure everything is pinned in. You don't make those big plays over the top. And you just look up at the end of the third quarter and you only have 17 or 14 points on the board. So I think it's a team that absolutely can do some of that. If they can slow down the Missouri run game, I think they can win the football game. I think everyone's figured out that the reality is if Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts are not killing you on the ground, Beau Pribla's probably not going to win the game with his arms. I think he can make a couple of plays. He's also going to make a number of mistakes. If you put the ball in his hands constantly and make him win the game with his arm, I just think it's going to be a heavy lift for him. So for Missouri, as they get into this, if they win this game, they still have Oklahoma, they still have A&M coming up. They could split those and still be firmly in the CFP. So this is a huge game for Missouri. If they don't win this one, I don't think you're winning those two games against A&M and Oklahoma back-to-back. Then you have, for Vanderbilt, they get Texas and Tennessee. Again, you just got to split them if you find a way to win this one. I frankly believe the loser of this one is out of the CFP. The winner of this one, at the very least, is still in the race, still has a couple of hurdles forward. The keys to the game, as far as I see it, which quarterback handles the pressure better, because the pressure just continues to mount for these two football teams. I know Missouri feels it very aggressively after the last couple of weeks. They know they have to win this one. They understand what's coming forward, and they understand that The SEC is not going to be a clean picture at the end of this thing. This win could be the difference between you getting to the CFP and getting left out. So this is going to be a huge one. Which one? Can Diego Pavia make a couple of throws and runs the way he has become one to do, but has to face Zion Young and Damon Wilson on the other side this time? And then Beau Pribula, can he make enough plays with his arm? He is a relative question mark in that category right now, but if he can make enough plays, this is going to be a dangerous team in this one and going forward. Then you have the Missouri edge rushers and linebackers. We talked about it. With this Vandy defense, you got to be right. You cannot have your eyes in the wrong place. You cannot overcommit to a hole. You cannot do the things that are really hard not to do in some respects against his offense. You got to play sound, and you have to play somehow attacking along with that. It is very, very difficult to stop this Vanderbilt defense. The Missouri edges and the Missouri linebackers are going to carry a lot of that burden on Saturday. And then Diego Pavia, it's a real thing. He is a factor in every football game. There is something about this kid that when a play needs to be made, he is going to make it. I don't know what it is. It is hard to describe what it is. It is a gamer. It is a ball player. It is whatever name you want to call it. He's really good at this. He finds a way to get things done. I think he is a guy that can do this in this level. Now, he has been prone to make a couple of mistakes. If you can put enough pressure on him, if you can hit him enough times, if you can just make him a little bit uncomfortable, maybe you get a fumble. Maybe you get one big mistake, and that changes this game. At the end of the day, I think this one's going to be downright special. It's two teams with really the ultimate breakthrough spot right here. They have the chance to win this big-time game, be set up for success, probably, I don't want to say punch their ticket to the CFP, but be in a great position to make the CFP moving forward. I'm not betting against Diego Pavia. I did it last week. It was really, really goofy. I'm gonna go Vanderbilt to win this one, 24-20. I can't trust Beau Pribula right now. I think he's a good player. I need to see him win a game with his arm, because the reality is Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts, they're incredible, incredible running backs. They're not going to outright win you games in the SEC, at least not week over week. So you need a little bit more from that quarterback. Until I see it, I can't feel confident that's going to come. So I'm going to pick Vanderbilt to win that one. I'm going to pick Diego Pavia. And then you got the nightcap. And as you can imagine, it's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It is going to be number 3 Texas A&M, as crazy as that sounds to some people. Number 3 Texas A&M at number 20 LSU. This one's going to be fun. Texas A&M sitting at 7-0 this season, and to me, I think they're one of those teams that could pretty much punch their ticket to the CFP. Now, they still have Missouri, South Carolina, and Texas on deck, so they still have enough games to hypothetically trip up. Let's be honest, those 3 games. They would be able to lose 2 out of the 3 and still be in the CFP. I think they can punch their ticket on Saturday night. I think they know that. So that's a little bit of pressure added to this. And last year, they were 7-1, and they found a way to go 8-4 by the end of the year. I don't think a collapse is coming, but this is where it would start, hypothetically. For LSU, they're in a bad spot. A lot of people talking about firing the coach, a lot of questions about the offensive line, a lot of questions about the program as a whole. You got to find a way to ignite this group, and it's going to be really hard. It's a very talented group of kids, and I think you have to find a way to work around that O-line. Maybe just watch Texas against Oklahoma. That's the best I have for you right now, because I don't know how you effectively navigate around the O-line, but you got to find a way to do it. It's not going to be a good group, but Garrett Nussmeier is making plays when he is given time to make them. You got to find a way to do it. This Texas A&M pass rush is disgusting, and we'll talk about it here in a second. They are going to get after Garrett Nussmeier. If he does not have more time to throw the football, you're going to lose this game, and it's going to look really ugly while you're doing it. So I don't know. I don't know how you get through this one. I don't know how you hold off the A&M pass rush. I'll get to the keys to the game, but I'm tipping my pick just a little bit here. For the A&M offense, they're a nightmare to deal with. LSU's been really, really good this year. They struggled just a little bit with that running quarterback in Diego Pavia, and they struggled just a little bit when you couldn't play all the way on your front foot, when you couldn't always play in attack mode, when you couldn't always move downhill. It got a little bit sketchy, and I think it could in this football game as well. But A&M's finding a way to win pretty much every single week. If they find a way to do it in this one, I think they're in great shape. If they lose, the Missouri game becomes a must-win in a hurry. If LSU wins it, that Alabama game becomes a whole lot more interesting after the bye. But we'll get into that if that does happen. For the keys to the game, it's Cassius Howell. That's the key to the game. At the end of the day, you have Tyree Adams out for LSU at the offensive tackle position. Cassius Howell's terrifying. He's got 8 sacks on the year. He's the fastest player off the edge in maybe the entire country. I think Colin Simmons is up there. I think Dylan Stewart. He is a freak. That's all you really need to know. I tend to believe that Garrett Nussmeier is going to be looking up at that guy quite a bit on Saturday night. We'll see if they can hold that guy off, but he's a nightmare. There's pressure for A&M coming into this one. They were 7-1 after 8 weeks. Last year they finished 8-4. You got to find a way. You got to find a way to win this one. I think this could be the one that just makes all these guys fully believe it's not going to happen. Fully believe there's never going to be a drop-off, and they're going to be able to run the road the rest of the way. They're going to be able to win out, is basically what I'm trying to say. I think this team is really, really talented. I don't think there is a drop-off coming. It has to be on their mind right now. I promise you. On some of those guys' mind, they're thinking, it's just about the time that things went wrong last year. Let's try to not make that the case this time. And then it's Death Valley at night. That's always going to be a factor in one of these football games. I don't know how bought in the fans are right this second. I think they got one more in them. I think it's because it's A&M, it's because it's at night. I think they got one more in them. We'll see what happens. I think it could be a very aggressive atmosphere because they win this one. Who knows what happens the rest of the year? But at the very least, you win this one. You ruin A&M season just a little bit, or you make it more sketchy. Let's just put it that way for the time being. At the end of the day, I like this A&M team. They're finding different ways to win. The defense, I think, does have questions, and I think LSU will be able to find some openings, but at the end of this, I think A&M's going to win. I think the A&M pass rush is going to be way too much for this LSU offensive line. I don't think they get much of anything going offensively, and I think that crowd just doesn't really get all that into it. I think A&M wins this one 23-17. I do think it's a defensive battle. I think the A&M offense gets a little bit shut down in the run game and just kind of sputters at times in this game, but at the end of the day, I think A&M wins this one. I think they move to 8-0, and they're looking down the barrel for sure at the CFP and possibly at Atlanta by the end of the season. But it's going to be really fun in the SEC every single week, and I understand there's some conversation about the rankings. Doesn't change that Missouri and Vanderbilt are two really fun teams to watch. Doesn't change that there's going to be a lot of really fun matchups to watch all throughout the season in the SEC. And we're going to be talking about them a lot on here. I can promise you that. But let's take another break here. When we come back, we got South Florida, Memphis, BYU, Iowa State, Illinois, Washington, Houston, Arizona State. A ton of games that are going to have a lot to do with what that one spot or what those two spots possibly from some of these conferences look like at the end of the year. We will talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.